Okay, I'm actually having a really good time kind of doing this stuff. I hope you are too. And I'm just going to close everything we already opened by right-clicking up here and choose Close Other Tabs to the right or Other Tabs. I'm going to go with Other Tabs. And so when we do MD in JavaScript, we were doing these JavaScript basics, and we have another kind of illustration of how JavaScript is crappy coming up. But this is the page we are working on. And then, that's okay. It's like the #1 most popular language in the world. So it's like totally successful. And it's like kind of nutty that this kind of mediocre to poor language, and it's been made much better over time, but it's kind of nutty that this mediocre to poor language became so successful. And the lesson from that is even if you don't have a good product, if you have the right product, it will succeed. So anyhow, here we are. We came to this one here, JavaScript Basics, and this is what we did, previously, and now we're getting down to variables. And you see here, and this is the other little thing where I'm like, wow, this is crappy the way they did that. Here's another warning. But like these warnings are, this should be saying, instead of warning, this should be saying like, this is great. This is a really good thing. But it says in this article, try entering the example code lines into your JavaScript console to see what happens. For more details on JavaScript console, see Discover Browser Developer Tools. Like why in whatever, whoever, why is that a warning? Like this should be like highlight or, fun thing to do, right? But they're like warning. I don't get it. So anyhow, so now we're going to learn about variables, and we're going to just kind of read through this and see how to use them and figure it out together. So variables are containers that store values. That's a good way to describe it. I'm going to right click that to see what comes up. And like, a variable is named reference to a value. And so when you think about variables, right, a variable is going to store a value of a certain type. And so some strictly typed programming languages, strictly typed, right, meaning, right, some strictly typed language meaning is a very strongly typed language in which there are more strict restrictions as to how operations work, right, and so strictly typed languages enforce typing on all data being interacted with. So int I equals 3, string s equals 4. So we cannot then store in s a number, right? Because we said that s is a string. And so that's strictly typed. And so, variables are containers that store values. And a variable will store a value of a certain type, right? So that value might be a string. That value might be an integer. That value might be a float, which is like decimal points, like 4.32 or something. So variables store a value of a certain type. And strictly typed languages require you to say what type is going to be stored in this variable. And that is good programming methodology, because you aren't accidentally going to store the wrong type of value in a certain variable. And that will catch you as a programmer from making an error and trying to store a value in a variable that is set to store values of type string. It'll catch you from storing something in there that's like not a string. So variables are containers that store values. You start by declaring a variable with the let keyword. And there's different ways to declare variables in JavaScript. You saw me use var in the previous video. VAR. var is the old way. And it has, we're going to see that coming up. But if we just go to var mdn, right, and look at var JavaScript, there we go. And var statement declares a function scoped or globally scoped variable, optionally initializing it to a value, right? And so, but let is going to have a more narrow scope. Let's going to have a more narrow scope. So we're going to use let because that's a better programming practice. And they added let to JavaScript because var was, too like loosey-goosey and too widely scoped. So they said, well, let's do let, which gives us block scope. So let keyword followed by the name you give the variable. Let my variable, right? And so that will declare a variable. But you'll notice we're not declaring the type of the variable there. So it's just saying let, and then there's a variable here. A semicolon at the end of the line indicates where a statement ends. So this is a statement, right? And a statement is like you're saying, here, do this, right? Let my variable, that's my statement, do this. It is only required when you need to separate statements on a single line. However, some people believe it's good practice to have semicolons at the end of each statement. There are other rules for when you should and shouldn't use semicolons. For more details, see your guide to semicolons in JavaScript. So that'd be like also a good thing to read about. And this is nice. It's only required when you need to separate statements on a single line. So maybe we'll start leaving our semicolons out. You can name a variable nearly anything, but there are some restrictions. So if you're a section about naming rules. So if you're unsure, you can check your variable name to see if it's valid. So some of the restrictions would be like you wouldn't want to name a variable let, because let's a key word in the programming language. So you couldn't say let, right? And have a variable named let and use the word let to declare the variable named let, because then the program's just going to get confused. It'll be like, what are you trying to tell me? Because let's a key word that you use specifically in this program for this purpose, right? So there are restrictions. And then there's also naming conventions like camel case. And so we'll see that coming up. So here's camel case, right? Like lowercase m and y, and then new word, so capital letter, right? Capital letter, and then lowercase. So that's called camel case. And so here we're declaring, after declaring a value, you could give it a value. So my variable is equal to Bob, because we declared up here, let my variable, and then we said my variable is equal to Bob, or we could just say let my variable equal Bob, right? So you could do both those operations on the same line. You retrieve the value by calling the variable name, my variable. So let my variable equal Bob, and then if you want to, you could say my variable is equal to Steve, and you could rename it. So let's try that out, and we're going to try it out in the next video.